All right, so welcome to the more than 20 of you who are watching us live, and welcome also to those of you who might be watching this recorded. Adam Ward here from Indiana University. I'll be trying to host our panel discussion for today. I'm joined today by Jefferson, Steve Loheide, Becca Barnes, and Emad Habib, whose photos you can see on right now, and you should see their smiling faces up toward the top of your screen on Zoom. So what we've got planned for today is a presentation that I think will last in the 20 to 30 minute range, followed by as much discussion as folks want to have. And our goal today is just to help as a community to think about what resources are out there, what strategies might we use, as many of us are transitioning away from face-to-face education for the foreseeable future. And just as a note, I think my panelists will agree with me, none of us proclaims to be experts in online education or researchers in pedagogy. We're people who have hit some of those first potholes perhaps before you have, or people who have experimented with different things. So the goal today is to have a constructive discussion and a safe place for us all to share ideas on what's working and what's not. Not to be prescriptive, but maybe to inspire some ideas as you think about what your next month or two are going to look like. Steve, would you go to the next slide? So in addition to sharing some of the strategies and resources that are out there, we're hoping that this is really the kickoff for a community-based discussion. And so as Julia noted, if you can see it over in the chat there, Quasi has a series of online resources. So basically pulling together a set of links that might be helpful to you, some of which go to curriculum or snippets thereof, some of which go to video clips or archives that might be interesting. And that's linked over in the chat box. And Julia, I'll just ask if you would paste that in again, because it doesn't new people who come in after you've sent it won't see it. And additionally, after today's webinar, we're going to open up a new discussion forum being hosted by Quasi. So you can see the link there, forums.quasi.org. It does ask you to register. So you'll create a username and password. And that's to help us keep the riffraff of the internet off of our discussion board a little bit. But the folks on this call, as well as a few others, will be helping moderate that. So it does require a login. It's instantaneous to be created. And we're going to get the resources that we have, as well as the discussion that we start today. That'll be a place that it can continue, and that our community can grow and support one another as online education becomes more of a norm for us. Next slide for me, Steve. Okay, so just a couple of notes for today on our webinar before we get started. Many of you will have been on a Zoom meeting before. Those of you joining by Zoom, I know there's at least 2 of you just on the phone. But those of you joining by Zoom, if you look down at the bottom of your screen, right about in the midpoint, I tried to point that blue arrow where I thought it would be. There's a button there called Q&A, question and answer. And that, if you click it, will pop open a new window for you. And this is a place that will actually archive along with our Zoom meeting. So rather than typing your questions into the chat box where things get messy and hard to keep track of, respectfully, we'd ask that you would type your questions in the Q&A box. And what that will do is let all of our panelists be responding to you in real time. That's going to create a resource that benefits everybody, whether they're on with us today in a synchronous participation, or whether they look at this tonight asynchronously from the group. So if you've got something that you want to share, or something that you want answered or responses to, anybody have ideas about how to do X, please start a thread in the question and answer for us. And then my goal is later today to transfer that all to the forum that I mentioned, so that not only our panelists can continue to respond, but community members can help one another. So that's going to be sort of our rules of engagement for the day. And with that, we'll go to our first panelist. So each panelist whose video you see will take just a minute or two to talk to you about one strategy or one set of resources that they're familiar with, just to help you think about what those next few weeks and months are going to look like. And I think, Anne, this is you. Is that correct?
All right. Can you guys hear me?
We got
okay.
you.
So I wanted to just talk about asynchronous teaching. So that means not requiring your students to all be in the same place online at the same time. I am not an expert on online pedagogy by any stretch of the imagination, but this is the technique that I've adopted for a watershed hydrology class that I am teaching right now, and that I had 3 days to transition to online. My understanding is that this is best practice, and I think particularly right now when student lives and frankly faculty lives are completely chaotic, and a lot of us feel like we're wearing far more hats than we usually do under less ideal circumstances than we normally have. I really was attracted to the flexibility of this approach, that people could watch the videos when it worked for them, or read the resources that made sense for them to read, and that their internet access would allow. So we serve students who might be from really rural areas where we know that bandwidth could be quite limiting, and doing something like Zooming into a class might be out of reach of many of our students. And so my goal in the asynchronous version of watershed hydrology was to try to respond to what I expect my students need from this class for the rest of the semester, given everything else that's going on. So partly the decision to go asynchronous could just be based on pragmatism, but one of the things that I'm finding really exciting about it is it lets me not be the one sage on the stage. Right? So it lets me tap into other voices and other expertise and make use of existing videos and blogs and other online resources. I think I have a second slide to highlight some of those. And so that's allowing me to focus in on weaving the various content together. Yeah, so just sort of took some screen captures of things that are available online. So I discovered that John Selker has this amazing series of short videos where he's teaching about infiltration. In the screenshot here, he's showing how unsaturated hydraulic conductivity is different and why it's different than saturated hydraulic conductivity. You could learn runoff generation from Jeff McDonnell, hydrogeophysics from Kamini Singh. I mean, what's already online is amazing, and it's not just lectures, but if you go to YouTube, you can find equipment manufacturers or other college students demonstrating how to use techniques. So here's a flow tracker being demonstrated in action by some community college students. So we're sad to be missing the lab opportunities and the field opportunities for our students, but we can use these sort of asynchronous resources to replace them, and maybe even showcase some hydrology in action, great videos of flash floods or urban flooding, where this one in the lower left corner takes you through a whole hydrograph of a rainstorm in a small urban channel. So students can really get the sense of what's going on. And then finally, not to toot my own horn too much, but it's not just video, but blog posts and written websites. Comet's got some really good stuff. I've been writing this blog, Highly Allochthonous, now for about 10 years. And, those are really good, particularly for students that have limited bandwidth, right? That maybe streaming videos isn't going to work for them, but they can read some text. It also lets people contextualize that. So Adam, or Steve, if you can back up a slide for a second. All these different resources that are out there, you can tap into. You can maybe talk to a colleague. Could you create one of these for me? And then your job becomes more of content curation and trying to figure out how to weave together the existing resources to meet the learning objectives that you have for the online version of your course. So I'm really focusing my creation of new content on tying these different resources that I'm finding together, filling in the holes, making sure that they sort of fit with the things that I'd ultimately like my students to get out of the watershed hydrology class. And one of the concerns with sort of using all these different resources and having different, a video here or this, that, and the other thing there is that your students are kind of going all over the place. And so kind of a top tip I have is to use your school's learning management system, whether that's Blackboard or Canvas or whatever, as a centralized repository. And so what I've done in my system is just have a page that has all of the resources that I want them to work through for, say, soil moisture and infiltration. And I've got learning objectives clearly labeled. And so they can see how, working through a series of 10 different videos or blog posts still ties into what we are doing in class. And they have that familiarity of the learning management system that they're used to, the place that they'll go to for quizzes and exams and to turn in assignments. So now it's just a content repository as well. And then finally, it's not an all or nothing sort of proposition. I am doing online office hours synchronously. So students who want to ask questions about content or assignments can join me in those online office hours if it works in their lives. And I did those today for the second time, and I had 3 students participate for the better part of an hour. I was able to walk them through a bunch of resources, help them with some derivations, and it was a really good opportunity. So you don't just need to never interact with your students again. Instead, you're really prioritizing quality of time over quantity of time in a virtual classroom with them. And that's what I have for you.
I'm Steve Loheide from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I have my experience with online teaching really started 3 years ago with quasi-virtual university. And I never had a grand plan of teaching online. This has happened in a bit of a way by accident. I wanted a way in which I could get experts like Adam Ward or Ann Jefferson to teach stream tracer best practices or urban hydrology, or have my students learn about drones from Scott Tyler or snowmelt modeling from Jessica Lundquist. And so that was the basis for quasi-virtual university. And the price I had to pay to get all of these folks teaching my students and bringing that expertise onto my campus was teaching online. And so I jumped into it with that kind of as my motivation. And the takeaway message that I want to share based on those experiences is that engaging the synchronous, so the real-time online classroom, is challenging, but possible. And there are lots of opportunities. If you have a certain bit of your lectures that are very much content delivery, you probably do want those to be in an asynchronous format. But for the parts of your lecture where you engage with your students and are active, maybe you want that part of your class to be synchronous. And so why do we want this active classroom? Well, it's the same as our face-to-face teaching. It increases attention, focus, and motivation of the students. And that's always important. But I think that now in these uncertain times, it may be even more important as we think about our students who may now be quite separated from their peers and living back home with their families and having an adjustment that, we don't know what the impact of that will be. And so just seeing and hearing from faculties and students might be reassuring to them in these opportunities to engage if you incorporate those in your courses. Also for me as an instructor, I really like teaching face-to-face, and I get more cues than I know from people. It helps to see Becca nodding there, and that I know she's listening, and Adam smiling. I know that they hear me, and so that's an important part of me when I'm a teacher, and monitoring engagement. I don't know if there's complete understanding of the content that I'm trying to deliver, but I often know when there is not understanding. That's usually pretty clear. And so I think that having some engagement is really important. And so how do we do that? Well, I think that the first really base level, almost completely obvious thing that's really important is setting expectations and ground rules in your classroom for what you expect. You know, in this case, say we weren't planning on having a online course, but we are. And my job, and I'm committed to this fully, is to make it as best as I can. And your job as a student is to make it better. And you can do that by participating, by telling me when things aren't working, by raising your hand and saying, you know, your live streaming's cutting in and out. I can't hear anything. Or just participating. And people, I think, really rise to the occasion. The other thing is that you can use some tools. So depending on what your platform is that you're using, there may be polling options within that tool, or a chat feature where people can ask questions. And I find these to be really helpful in that everyone can respond in some way. There's one tool that I really like. It's mentimeter.com. It's free on the internet and has a whole bunch of different questions from multiple choice to Likert scale, sorts of strongly agree, strongly disagree, to word clouds such as the one here. And so, for instance, in quasi-virtual university, we read some of the current literature and critically evaluate it. And so I'll ask the students in the class, what assumptions do the authors make? And everyone can type in their response. And the responses that a lot of people are repeating, you know, show up bigger in this word cloud that develops real time. And that gives me the option, that gives students, everyone, the option to put their answers forward to see, are there a lot of agreement about, in this case, the major assumptions? And then I can pull out ones, you know, the ones that everyone says, like, are the wells that are used representative? And we can talk about that, and I can just ask one student to talk about it. I can pick out some of the ones that maybe only one person says and ask about that. And that kind of gives me a way to pull people into the conversation, especially when they know that, oh yeah, other people have the same answer as me. Also, I find that this kind of anonymous response is really helpful when there's a wrong answer, right? I can then talk about an answer and talk about why it's not right and address some of those misconceptions without targeting a single student who put that answer forward. And so there are some benefits to these tools. And, you know, I think we'll see how quickly we adopt them and how well the bandwidth can handle synchronous teaching during these times. But we do have to remember that we want to record all of these interactions so people who can't engage real time can view those after the fact. And that's my main point. So I will pass it on to Becca.
Hi, so I'm in a sort of, not a unique situation, but a slightly different situation that I'm not converting a class midstream, so to speak. So, so anyone who's on a quarter system might also be in this position. You're finishing up the last quarter and maybe the new quarter is going to start online. So just to echo some of the things that everyone else has said, I just think we need to remember that whatever we do is good and good enough, and that we really need to scale back expectations. These are not classes that were designed or intended to go online. And so I think it's just important to show ourselves compassion for all of the things that we are now doing within our own homes, and our students the same compassion that we hope they show us when, you know, all of these things that we've dreamed up or just learned about and try sometimes will work and sometimes won't work. And I bet our students will give us that latitude if we give them that latitude. So, but one thing that's really exciting for me is because I get to start from the beginning, I can honestly say I'm more excited about my class now than I was prior to this interesting moment we find ourselves within. So at Colorado College, we teach all of our classes intensively in 3.5 weeks. Students take one class at a time, and I'm teaching one class at a time. This means that I have between 15 and 25 plus contact hours with my students a week. And this is a really different system to convert to distance learning. My next class is the community engaged project-based synthesis class for our environmental studies seniors. So it's an interdisciplinary class that I'm co-teaching with a law professor. And so what we've decided to do is that we are videoing all of our community members who have graciously agreed to do this, videoing at 6-foot different distances or on Zoom. So this will be some of the content students can consume asynchronously. We are also creating essentially libraries of articles and primary material for our students to read. We're going to use a tool called Hypothesis through Canvas, and this allows you to interact with your students in real time as they're reading. One of the things I realized is that, you know, sort of my superpower of field trips, lab analyses, all of these things that make CC classes sort of unique and, you know, why students come here, they were all just taken away from me. But because we focus so much on those experiences, often we don't have the time to do a lot of editing and revision. And it's one of the things that I actually find to be hard on the block. And so I realized I have never been able to work with my students in this way on their ability to understand, synthesize material, and then write about it. And so those are going to be my learning objectives for my new class, as opposed to thinking about how to digest and synthesize the data that they created for this project that's happening in Colorado Springs. And so by shifting the focus to having different learning outcomes, I can really focus on the things that we can do asynchronously. And then we're gonna have daily approximate 1-hour interactions with the students. And this includes having chats with authors about their papers, right? This is something I would have never done in my regular class, but now, thanks to the beauty of science Twitter, I have all of these awesome scientists who have agreed to meet with my students, like in a small group setting and like talk about their paper. So not only are they going to get to talk to these scientists and learn more about urban hydrology, they're also going to get an insight into like scientists as people. And I think that that's something that we just need to remember. Like this is also an opportunity for us to show our students that we're humans outside of the classroom, and that like all of those things make us who we are and the scientists and educators that we are. So like I sort of known for embracing this part of myself, but I'm really like trying to think about how that makes my class better, as opposed to thinking of it as a limitation. But it's going to give the students the ability to they're essentially going to work in modules. So we've divided the class into 6 modules. These will break the material up into smaller digestible chunks that will make it easier for timing. At the end of each module, the students are going to write a 2-page memo that thinks about the literature that they just learned through the lens of this project that we're doing in Colorado Springs. And then we have 15, say, memos on the same topic. Then each student will be assigned a sort of lead author role to make master memos, sort of each of the modular memos. And so this will be the document that we give to the city. So we're still following through on the fact that we wanted to do a project that would inform Colorado Springs utilities and municipal government how to like undergo urban renewal and thinking about these river systems. And so like everyone's been really generous, and I just think that you know, it sounds really cheesy, but we really can help each other and make these classes a lot like more exciting than they may have been before. So I'm really trying to sort of embrace the challenge as like a way to think about my teaching in a totally new way. I'm done chatting.
All right, and Emad, you are up next, sir.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. And I apologize, the alarm has just got off now at the office. I don't know if you can hear it in the background. I can continue to talk. It's probably a false alarm. So if it's not too annoying to you, I'll try to make it brief. And so thank you very much. I think this is great that we are talking with each other and learning from each other. I already learned from the previous panelists some tips and tools, and I started saving them on my desktop. So this is really great. What I'm going to talk today about is the Hydrologic platform. And this platform, we started working on it over the last few years with support from NSF and other agencies. And the primary objective of it really is to promote the collaborative development and adoption of active learning resources in the field of hydrology and water resources. The primary audience, because of the funding nature, is undergraduate education, but some of the resources that we have there are also for kind of entry-level grad courses, I think. And as many of us are starting to shift to this remote delivery, I thought maybe Hydrologic can help here. And thanks Adam and Steve and everybody for allowing us to share these resources with the community. So the platform that we have online is basically developed or built on the open source edX platform that is being used by other universities for delivering their online open educational resources like MIT and Harvard. And what we did is we packaged the platform and made some enhancement to it to support education in hydrology and water resources. And we added some elements that we thought can be helpful for us. And the idea of the platform really is to become like a place where the community can work together in the development of online hydrologic educational content. And so that's really the spirit of it. You can find resources and you can also use it in your classroom as is. And you can also customize the modules that you have there, basically modify them if you want. And you can share them back with the community through the same platform, and also use some existing tools for assessments, rubrics, and so forth to facilitate the learning of the students. So these are the primary functionality of the platform. And I'm gonna, if you go to the next slide, please, Steve, or whoever is controlling. So this is some examples of the courses or the modules that we have on our site, on the platform. You can use them as they are pre-packaged. And you can also modify them, like I said. If you develop something and share it, it will sit there and can be used by others to benefit from your own content. We have several modules or courses that focus on some fundamental topics in hydrology and water resources engineering, such as rainfall runoff processes, flood prediction, flood modeling, things like that, and also some emerging topics, including issues like energy and water nexus or climate teleconnections. And some of these modules are pretty comprehensive in terms of the length and can take about few weeks in the semester. And some of them are pretty modular that can last for 1 week or so. And the students will need no more than maybe 3 to 5 hours to finish the topic. So these are really ideal for asynchronous delivery. Thank you, Anne, for actually talking about that. I learned the hard way. I delivered my first synchronous class last week. And I'm like Steve, I like face-to-face, and I tried to use all the technology, but I don't think I did a good job. And I'm gonna try to switch more to asynchronous, and I have a lot of resources already, and I'm gonna check out the ones that Anne shared earlier also. These can be great. But anyways, the modules, like I said, are pre-packaged. They are developed and are there for you to use, actually for anybody to use. You can assign them on your LMS, like Anne said. Again, I think that's a pretty good practice. So you can get a link of this particular module and put it put in your LMS. This way the student doesn't have to feel like they have to go through different sites and get lost. The modules also cover different topics: hydrology, hydraulics, and some of them, like I said, can be finished in a few hours, and some are much longer. I think the third slide, I'm going to try to finish quickly. I apologize again for the background noise. I just wanted to give you a little bit of deeper look into what a module or a course on how to learn will look like. We try to design these things using the constructive alignment idea or theory, where you basically start by thinking about what are my learning objectives. So every module will have those upfront and very well presented to the students. And then there will be the content. And the content that for many of these modules is pretty rich. So this is not just a video or a PowerPoint slide, it's actually the material. It can be as detailed as what you see in a textbook, actually. And it has a lot of active learning elements between quizzes and data-based and data-driven and modeling exercises within the content. And then you also make sure that we have the modules having those rubrics embedded with them and made upfront for every assignment that the students complete. So on one hand, it makes the instructor's job easier, because once they get the assignment submitted, they can grade it very easily. And it's also fair for the students so that they can know, especially in this asynchronous or remote delivery mode, how are they going to be evaluated? How are they going to be graded? Again, I emphasize that this is really suitable for asynchronous delivery. And I think that the main idea here is that you can use them as they are, or if you want to export a course of these and repackage it as your own and modify it the way you want, that's also possible, so that you are not really tied to the rigid instructions or information that's already there. So I think this is all I had to say. I'm sorry about the background noise. This is an active project for us, so we have a team of folks who are working on it. Myself and a couple of colleagues at Utah State and BYU, and we also have an education research expert working with us. So we are offering support because that's part of our project. We actually have an ongoing cohort of fellows who work with us and develop materials. Some of these modules actually have been developed by folks not part of the project. So we have resources available to provide, and we also have some support to answer questions, guide you through how to use a certain module. So feel free to reach to me or anybody that you see from the project team on the website. With that, I'll stop here, and thank you again for being part of this.
All right. Thank you, Emad. And I'll just note, Emad, over in the Q&A, Clint Wilson out there gave you guys a shout out and has been using HydroLearn successfully with a civil engineering senior level course. So you heard it from the community that HydroLearn it's there, and there are ready-made modules that can help buy you a couple of class periods as you prep your own online content. So one last slide here before we turn this more into a discussion than a one-way presentation from us. One of the things that I think is really important for us to remember is making sure that we're delivering education to all of our students. And I think the knee-jerk response from many institutions has been, here's training on Zoom, here's training on Kaltura, here's training on Panopto, or whatever is the favorite tool of your institution to record video or host a video chat. And that's really great, because we do have colleagues, and some of us on this call have had to learn new tools very quickly. But at the same time, that makes the inherent assumption that every student is going to be able to participate that way. And so I wanted to just take, and we, I should say, as panelists, wanted to just take one slide here to remind you all, your students are a very heterogeneous bunch. They're all facing a lot of uncertainty. Some of them have been asked to leave campus and not return until fall. Some of them are graduating and they've been asked to leave campus and more or less not let the door hit you, because they won't be back for graduation ceremonies, which are getting canceled. Those students are now heading home. They may not have technology. They might not have access to broadband internet. They might not have enough data on their cellular plan that they can live stream every course. They might be part of a couple who share one laptop and both have class at the same time. So the idea that every student can simply tune in and consume unlimited material interactively is one that I would respectfully challenge. Well, I think that there's a lot of benefit to the synchronous learning, and I'm absolutely having synchronous components in my own courses. The asynchronous techniques, I do think they help level that playing field because students can do it at a time and a place when they can connect with the appropriate technology. Remember also, some of these students are not living alone in a single bedroom apartment, but they're living with families or extended families. Do they have access to a space where they can quietly focus to do the reading, to watch the video, to participate? Does changes to childcare with daycares or schools closing or switching to distance learning? I can tell you all, I personally, as of 4 days ago, I'm now homeschooling 2 children until at least May 1st. So the idea that we can all simply tune in and don't have other responsibilities in our lives that are causing disruption is not real for many professors. And we ought to remember that those aren't real for every student either. A reminder that if you have students in your course that have accommodations relating to the way that they consume content or the way that assessment works for them, you could proactively reach out to those students and reach out to the office on your campus who helps organize these accommodations to ensure that they're getting the support that they need in your course. And a reminder on accessibility, that when we generate online content, we ought to think about making sure this is accessible to our students. Some simple things that we can do are transcriptions. So there are automated and free tools to closed caption your videos. They work moderately well. The more technical your content, the more creative the interpretations often get, but it's a starting point. We might think about the ability to see color that some of our students have that may manifest as you teach digitally, but you wouldn't have had that happen in a classroom. All of this to say, we think it's very important that as instructors, we need to recognize the situation that our students are now in and some of the challenges that they may face. I'll speak for myself, that requires a degree of understanding and compassion, where perhaps you or a colleague prides themselves on being the one who really enforces deadlines and is ready to teach students a lesson so the real world doesn't eat them alive, right? And that's a valid form of instruction and mentoring perhaps, but in this situation, we need to remember that they're balancing a lot of different things and a lot of changes. And so I'm encouraging you all to really think about this. Down at the bottom of the screen, one of the things that our group talked about in preparation for this call is actually surveying your students. So perhaps none of us has ever taken the chance to ask our students, will you have access? If I choose to host synchronous office hours, how likely are you to make it? And you might be quite surprised to learn that you have several students who are multiple time zones away and sharing technology or sharing one internet connection, who can't simply log in at 8 p.m. Eastern time for your office hours block. So really gathering a little information about who you're teaching and what they have access to could be quite informative as you set down the road of thinking what the next few months are going to look like. And Anne is reminding us in the chat box here as well, the assumption that our students will not be the people getting sick is also not a good assumption, right? There will be students for whom accommodations need to be made, whether this is their physical health or their mental health as we go through this scenario. Okay, so Steve, could you go back to the slide I have that has the forum on it? I think it's the second slide in the deck. Perfect. So these were the goals we started with. I just wanted to flip backwards because we've gained about 10 people on the call since this started. Down at the bottom of the screen, you all should see a tab about where that blue arrow is pointing that says Q&A. And our preference would be that you use that Q&A to submit questions that allows multiple panelists to respond to you. But you can use the chat if you need. Everything we have today is going to be archived on Quasi's website. And we will also be launching a new forum and we'll send a link out to all of you who are on the call, as well as make that available by social media. So we're getting a new discussion board set up to support our community as we transition as a group to distance education or online learning. So with that, I want to first thank everybody on the panel and those of you who joined on the call. Hopefully you thought about this in a way that you haven't before. And we really do hope that this is kicking off a conversation. And so, in that spirit, if you have questions, if there are topics that we haven't touched on, if there are things that you personally are passionate about, I'd encourage you to share those through the Q&A. I'll try to facilitate some balance of questions that show up in the Q&A and asking our panelists to reflect on and respond to any of those comments. And when it turns out that none of us has a great idea, but maybe Kevin McGuire does, I'm just picking on one of the names I see on the call. Kevin, there is a little raise hand tool that you can use in Zoom, and we can try and unmute you and pull you in to tell us what we need to know. So with that, our panel is here. We're excited to talk about education and online learning, and we would love to hear from you all. So panel, one of the first questions here, Andrew Murray writes to us, Andrew is planning an asynchronous approach with a class of 16 students and nervous that combining it with live activity is actually going to leave people out. So how do we balance asynchronous and synchronous instruction? How do we make sure that live author discussions are inclusive and give everybody access? Becca, sure.
Well, so to answer my approach for the first thing, Andrew, is that, so I'm having a series of these chats with authors, and I'm going to assign certain students to be primary question askers. So sort of similarly to like how this is set up, where there's some of us are panelists and others are participants. We can set it up that way. So there's a little bit more high stakes, I guess, but we're gonna figure out who can go with whom based on scheduling, right? So it will be based more on when they're available. Because I have sort of this unique situation, we've asked them to set aside 4-hour windows during the day, but we have promised them that we're only going to ask them to be synchronous with us for 1 hour a day. And so we're hoping that we can schedule them at different times so people can be involved. But if you can't, like if my students can't because of time zones or what have you, or the 17,000 other reasons that could happen during a pandemic, then it's not required, so it will be recorded. And one of the other things we're doing is that we're gonna make communal annotated bibliographies. So as the students are reading the articles prior to the conversations with the authors, I will be able to give them feedback as well as direct them to other resources, because it's a synthesis class and they've all had maybe slightly different classes coming to it. So maybe I'm being wishful, but I think that will make sure that folks are there. And then some people also have chosen to have a conversation with me offline, in the sense that it's online but not live with students, and have said, but they would totally be happy to answer questions. So then we're gonna have a discussion forum, and then one student will be in charge of summarizing those questions and communicating with that author. So those are the two ways I've thought about trying to address that. But I'm trying to have at least a little bit of synchronicity each day, because I know that at least my thesis students have really appreciated talking to me all week, like through Skype or what have you. And I think that, our students look to us for a lot more than we realize. And I just think it's important to have that face-to-face if you can, and if they need it. I'm fully preparing to have, times at really weird times, because I have students that are abroad, to make sure that that face-to-face time happens at least occasionally for them if they want it.
Yeah, and I will, I'll just add one of the things that we heard during the presentation today, and I just want to re-emphasize as well, making sure that when you are doing synchronous activities, that those are getting recorded so that students who are not able to participate live can still get some of that content. While that's not as good as being there and being active, it's a gap fill. So, oh, Steve, yes, sir.
I'll just add something. So one component of my class this semester that is going to be delivered synchronously is student presentations. So we have about a quarter of the class is based on students choosing papers from the literature that they present on for 25 minutes and then lead a class discussion for 25 minutes. And we are through two of 6 of those before we went online. And so we're going to continue that as one of our synchronous activities. And to help make accommodations, especially for bandwidth, we are having those PowerPoint presentations put online ahead of time so people can view them. And then people who don't have an internet connection but do have a phone can call in and listen. And so we have on this Zoom, we have 2 people who have called in as opposed to connecting through internet. So that's an option for that. We're going to also meet during the time of our normal class, but recognize that everyone's schedule is no longer what it used to be.
Thank you, Steve. So Steve, would you pull the screen share down just so our videos can all get larger too? And that thread is still live over in the Q&A if other panelists want to add anything. The next question that I saw come in is one from Brian Mark, who asks, I do a lot with group projects, insight or guidance here. I know students are more tech-able than I am, but this could be problematic without in-person meetings. What do you think, panel? Group projects, how is this going to work? Brian, I'll note that one of the things that I think is, I agree with you that we all often have a mental model of our students being more tech savvy than us. We maybe think of some students as digital natives. That's a term that people use a lot. But in fact, they may have grown up with technology, but they may not be experienced in collaboration with technology. So, I see in my traditional courses a lot of organization happening in those 5 minutes right before and right after class. Even if it's just touching base to say, we all agree we're not stressing this week about the project, good. And that gets totally removed when we put classes online. So I do think that your student, for me, I do expect that my students can still manage group projects, but I'm going to try to provide them with some training. So they may not know, for example, that they all have at my institution, they can download Zoom and schedule and host meetings, that's a free service that they have. So I'm going to provide a little bit of training to my students to say, we're adding a memo that is expectations for how their team will collaborate. And we're adding some content to train them and say, okay, this is what your team said you would do. Here are the tools and technologies that you have, basically getting them some mentoring on how to be a distance collaborator. And Steve, I see your hand up. You're over there to me.
Yes, I'll just add to that. So one of the ways that one of the steps I've taken with my course is we use Blackboard Collaborate Ultra as our web conferencing system, and you can open up a room that is just always open that people can go in. So it doesn't use bandwidth unless people are in it, but you can go into it at any time you want. And so we have a discussion board that's been added to our learning management system, which happens to be Canvas. And people can set up times to, talk about homework problems or meet up. They already have a kind of built-in, we can go to this discussion room. And it's a small class, so I just have one. But if you had a bigger class, you might have several of those that people could develop and have kind of ways of connecting outside of the classroom, both asynchronously on the discussion board and then setting up times where they can meet to talk in this kind of same format like Zoom.
Okay, and let's see. I see Will Wolheim with a question that somewhere in here. So Will's talking about a course that he teaches, freshwater resources, that includes non-majors. He wants to get them outside. Sounds like he wants to get them active, collecting and analyzing their own data. So Will has shared a couple ideas he has. One is local precipitation collection. So each student, I'm gonna riff on what Will is suggesting here. Each student doing something like leaving a bucket outside of their home and measuring their own rainfall depth, and then comparison to radar, visit a stream site, take a selfie, and describe using web-based tools. So one, Will, thank you for sharing a couple of really good ideas of ways that you can get your students active, collecting and analyzing data, causing them to compare what they see in the real world to some digital resources. That's really nice. And that's, some of those kinds of activities are nice and easy and asynchronous. And then Will says, other ideas. So panelists, as well as people on the line, this is one where panelists, feel free to share anything that pops into your head, and this is a good use of our chat box. So the 30 some of you out there can all feel free to type in your ideas of what people could do out there too. And sure.
Yeah, so I put an answer in, but I guess I can kind of riff on it a little bit more. So I really liked Will's idea of having students go out to a stream, but maybe one of the things they could do is look for the USGS gauge closest to them, and then see if they can go find it, and then say, what is, USGS gauge is stream gauges. There are certain criteria we want in the stream channel for a good gauging location, right? And rather than telling them a priori what that is, could you have them sort of document what's going on at their site? What is the gauging location like versus other parts of the channel? Share their images with each other, create some sort of shared document, and then see if they can come up with the criteria for a good gauging location themselves. I mean, maybe they'll just Google it, but maybe they'll have more fun trying to figure out what are good locations and what are not good locations. Another one that I think could be fun to do on the fly is soggy boot or soggy pants mapping. So there is actually a nice paper about soil moisture mapping based on how long you can sit on the ground before your pants get wet. So there's a scale of 1 to 7. And 7 is standing water, and maybe it's 1 to 6. And one of them's like, it makes a squelching sound with your boots. And another one, at the other end of the spectrum, you can sit on the ground for as long as you want, and your pants don't get wet. So you could either do that over time in a location, or you could, walk around a field. We actually did this on a field trip last year, and we also had a soil moisture probe with us. So we could then compare our ratings to the soil moisture probe measurements, but you could do that without the soil moisture probe. And that's the sort of thing that, again, you're kind of using your students to crowdsource data, and then you can talk about what does this mean physically. I'd love to hear about other ideas that don't require equipment. I do think, as much as I like the send my students to the stream gauge idea, we do have to acknowledge that some students may not have cars, or it may not be safe for them to go do a lot of field work. So thinking about things that they can do, even if they live in an apartment and can't put out a rain gauge, or even if they can't get to a USGS gauge, maybe giving them a bunch of options and encouraging them to do one of the options.
Yep, Becca, I saw your hand go up, and then Emad, we'll go to you next.
I mean, just to add to USGS data-ness, I mean, instead of doing actual field trips, they could do sort of web-based field trips with data using their closest gauge, but using data from the USGS websites, right? And for everyone who does not remember the first 17 times they tried to do that, it would be really important to give them very clear directions as to how to get stream flow and chemistry measurements or what have you off of that. But one thing that, in terms of trying to embrace the fact that you now have students that are in lots of different places instead of one place, you could actually have them share how their watersheds are different, and they could do a little web-based discovery of their own watershed. Where is that different from where their drinking water resources are from? Or, you know, that could bring up lots of different questions about like how water is managed, how we monitor it, and all those things. And they're still they're like discovering something about where they live, or where they're staying. I shouldn't make assumptions that they're now where they, like, their home is. But I just think that there's lots of things that you could do even without making them go outside. And I say making them because I think it's really important to remember that all of our students can't access the outdoors. They can all go outside hopefully, but not all of them can. So, right, we should just think about accessibility all the time.
Yep. And Emad, did I see your hand going up as well?
Yeah, I just had one idea about the field activities, and it's pretty simple actually. Sometimes I have the students use an online tool for delineation of watershed. There are simple tools online like Wiki Watershed or Model My Watershed. So they can find, you know, a certain location, figure out where that outlet is for the watershed. And I ask them to go and visit the site, right? Because with Google Earth, Google Map, they can actually figure out where that outlet exactly, and they can drive up there and kind of look at the channel and maybe drive around and figure out, you know, some of the channel connectivity. Again, it presents some challenges if the outlet is not accessible, so you probably have to pick a few sites that you know that will work, you know, and assign that to them.
Thanks, Emad. So I'm gonna, since I'm allegedly helping lead this discussion, I'm going to use my prerogative to ask a question of our panel and of our group that's not on our Q&A, but something that's been on my mind a lot is assessment. So we've been talking a lot about planning, we're talking a lot about delivering content, but of course that final piece, and one that your students may be stressing about right now, or that you may be stressing about right now, is assessment. So at the end of the semester, we're meant to assign a grade that reflects somehow quantitatively and qualitatively our understanding of if students have achieved our learning objectives. And so I guess I'd maybe just like to open it up to the group here to just reflect a little bit on, you know, what are your strategies for assessment? What has changed in your thinking about assessment? What are you worried about that you'd like the panel or the attendees to type in the chat box and tell us they're stressing about too? Or what are we doing as a community with assessment of our students? Because getting this ball rolling online is only the first problem we face. Then we're going to need some way to make these kind of decisions. Becca, I saw you looking ready to volunteer.
Maybe an unpopular opinion, but once again, we are not online teachers. If you are teaching an online class and it was designed that way from the beginning, that is a very different scenario. So I am a strong advocate for all universities moving to pass-fail for these classes. I have actually emailed my students and just said in boldface type, I strongly encourage you to change your grade track. So my institution has opened the window for that, so anyone can do it, but I would, and just explain why, right? Don't say that it's because you don't think they can do the work. That's not what it is. I want them to sort of embrace the learning experience and actually try to remember like the point of this in the first place, right? It's not to get an A, it's to learn as much as we possibly can. And one of the things that's really interesting is that I have learned about all of these pedagogical tools that I didn't know about in the last 5 days. So I mentioned hypothesis. There's lots of other things, but you can actually track how your students are engaging with the material, and not in a sort of, pardon the expression, big brother way, but in a way that you can then provide the resources they need to better understand those articles, right? And I'm personally really excited about that. I'm like, oh, they don't remember something from my hydrology class? Not a problem. I can like put something in Canvas that's like a basic, review chapter on like geomorphology or whatever they don't remember. It's fine, right? But that way we can like really help our students because we're engaging with them in this asynchronous way that allows us to like track what's going on. I actually think I don't know, once again, too optimistic, but I think that I might have a better understanding of where students are falling down on their understanding now in this upcoming class than I've had in the past, where I rely on students asking me for help, which we all know how well that goes.
I'm just going to start picking on panelists now. And we haven't heard from you for a while. What what are you going to do for assessment this semester, Anne, or do you know?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Thanks a lot. So Adam knows that I've been struggling with this because I was supposed to have a midterm this week, and then we went online this week, and our dean said we couldn't have any midterms this week, and so now I'm trying to figure out how to take what has always been an in-class short answer, calculations, draw some diagrams, tell me how you understand the concepts sort of exam, and transfer it into something that's online. One of the decisions that I have made is that I'm not going to pretend that there's any such thing as a closed book exam online. But I'm also not comfortable with the idea of a sort of 24-hour take-home exam, because I don't think that's fair to our students in this situation. So what I'm trying to figure out how to do is tread this line between saying it's open book, open notes, open internet, please just don't ask your friends, and giving them long enough to do some level of looking things up, but not teach themselves the entire content that they need to do the exam while they're doing the exam. So not giving them so long that they can't have done no prep. But I'm still not quite sure what that's going to look like. But in addition to this sort of exam problem that is facing me coming up next week that I teach, one thing I have done with the transition to online stuff is add some multiple choice quizzes. And now I'm trying to figure out how to write multiple choice quizzes that assist in learning. And because what I am afraid of is giving them this long list of resources to go through and some learning objectives, and then them not realizing that they haven't learned the material until they get to the exam. And so I'm developing multiple choice quizzes on a fairly regular basis, and they will get 2 chances to do them. Again, they won't have them open for forever, but they will have enough time that if they need to go review part of a video, they can go review part of a video before they do the exam. And the reason I'm giving them 2 chances is that if they realize after they've done it the first time that they didn't understand the material, they can go back and they can have another chance to do it. Or if their internet disconnects and a cat sits on their computer and the kid all the things that can happen, right? That they don't have to freak out and say like, oh my God, I blew my one chance to earn this. And so in the spirit of Becca's just make everything pass fail, what I'm hoping is that these quizzes both increase their learning and nicely pad their scores a little bit and recognize the effort that they're putting into the class. But I don't have all the answers yet. And if anybody's got brilliant solutions for midterms and final exams online, I would love to hear them. I am continuing with problem sets as well, but that has been less of a pain to transition online.
Yeah, and just a couple things I'll add to or endorse. One is, these terms synchronous and asynchronous are new to most of us. We've always done a blend of these two. The problem sets that Anne's planning to continue have always been asynchronous learning that her students have done. And her lectures have always been synchronous learning. So we are already experts at teaching this way. We just haven't used the terminology that's popular at the moment. And I'll endorse, a few other things with Anne. I also am freaking out about assessment and don't know what I'm doing, but I'm trying. And one of the things that I'm also intending to try in my course is the idea that, what I did for our most recent quiz was I've set it up in Canvas so that I posted a file. I can see when students download that file, and they're meant to upload the file back to me within 2 hours of when they download. That's much more time than they would normally have in class to allow for the fact that you have to maybe take a picture of your written content and then re-upload it. But what I've told the class is I expect it to be uploaded within 2 hours of when you download it. So don't start until you're ready to finish. And that's not automated right now, so I'm checking that for every student to see what time their downloads and uploads occurred. If I was teaching 300 students, I'm not sure I could handle that. But that's the way that I'm trying to balance the concept of, you know, an unlimited block of time doesn't maybe assess their knowledge quite the way I want to, but I do need to account for the fact that people's schedules are different. So that's how I've kept some, I don't know, time limitation and some study requirement on it, is that it's the time window, I think, is much longer than they really ought to need, but it's not open. It's not the Wild West. So I give students a week. So guys, this is going to open the time and day we would normally start a quiz, and I need it uploaded back to me by that time next week. You pick the 2-hour block that works for you. So that's very similar to what Anne is up to. And Steve, I saw your hand go up at one point along the way, I thought.
Not intentionally.
Unintentionally? All right, almost touched your face and then stopped. All right, Becca, how about you?
I'm just gonna second all of what you're saying and just say that this is yet another opportunity. Like, this is a way better way of assessing our students, right? Assessing them after they have taken the time to study something, you know, and I have the benefit of only teaching small classes. So my classes have 26 students in them. But if a student gets less than a 70% on any assignment in my class, I give them the opportunity to redo it for a 70%, because my goal is to have them understand the material. If they got a 50, probably don't understand the material, or they had a bad day, right? And so because I've been teaching in this compressed way for 6 years, it's something that I have really tried to think about, the fact that there are days that I go in and do I want to be delivering 5 hours of content that day? No, I don't, you know, but I do, right? And, but my students, you know, they also have stuff going on in their lives. And so I've just tried my best to accommodate life, because the block doesn't really do that. And I think that the asynchronicity of what Anne and Adam just talked about really allows all of us to do this to some extent, even with 300-person classes. And I think that that's actually really awesome, right? Like, it's a change for us, but it does mean that we can maybe figure out what our students are learning more than did our students perform well on the day of the exam.
So I do want to make sure we're also being respectful of our participants here. So Huri Ajami has an open question that none of us has dared type an answer to yet. Online resources for teaching hydrologic modeling. So Emad, could I ask you to maybe talk a little bit about, I know there's some modeling tools that that have some walkthroughs on HydroLearn. Would you be willing to talk a little bit about those?
Yes, absolutely. We have couple modules there, and I can send the links to a question later. But we have a couple modules that cover on HMS, simple ones, you know, starting from the delineation of the watershed all the way to designing a detention basin. So you use HMS for that. So we find it very useful. Actually, students like it, and it's very practical and very applied. We also have another module or two on HEC-RAS. So if you're familiar with that, again, it's a simple one on culvert design using RAS. And I think I'll try to dig back to see some other sites that I'm familiar with. That I think there are some modules that Venkatesh or some videos Venkatesh from Indiana, Purdue has posted. UT Austin, I think, have some couple also modules on hydrologic modeling using HMS and RAS. So, yeah.
Muted. All right, other folks on the panel, other tools that you all are familiar with. I see Jan Siebert has posted a link over in the Q&As as well. I'll say that when I've taught modeling, not in this format, but just in more of a traditional format, what I've often done, let's see, I'll pick on the Qual 2K model that the EPA supports for stream TMDL development. It's broadly spreadsheet based for its interface. But one of the things that I do there is I start I build some models that are absolutely working. Students can open and hit run and get results. And so I'll sort of build like, here's a minimum viable model for you. So you can see that I've typed the number in here, here, and here. And then I'll build a model that's maybe 3 steps farther than that. And I'll assign them questions that have to be done in between. So you have the minimum viable model. Now add this other species of nitrogen to it. Maybe I want ammonium and nitrate in this model. Can you do that? Now add sediment. Can you do that? And answer a few questions. And then they're trying to get to this spot. But if they struggle along the way, they have a model with nitrate in it working already. And always my hope, and what I prime the class with is, you know, I'm giving you models that exist like every 5th step as benchmarks. The objective is not for you to open the most sophisticated model and answer the questions. The objective is for you to start from the very first model and build it in its complexity until yours is performing the way that mine performs. And I think what's been really helpful, if a student wants to open that last one, I haven't set any required quizzes or something along the way. They could open it and have it in, you know, instantly. But we do talk a lot to prime them about the idea that the objective of this is not to open a functioning model. It's that you are learning the process of building a model, and really being transparent with my students about why the instruction is set up the way it is has been extremely successful. So that's an idea, providing our students with, you know, sort of some benchmarks and asking them to start from one and build to the next and so on. We're all laughing at Becca's helper here. All right, let's see. Others out there. I see Emad's posting a couple of links to some other modules.
I think they may only be going to panelists though.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna post them in the Q&A if they are
okay.
still there.
Perfect.
Question, right? Yeah.
Thanks.
Adam, there was a question from Ken that's under answered, but we haven't really talked about yet.
Oh, great. Yeah, so Ken is asking, Ken uses Canvas for their learning management system. He's going to depend on it more and more. There are functions including embedding Zoom meetings within Canvas. For those who have taught remotely, how do your students get technical assistance? Does it fall to you? Are there other resources? I'm afraid our tech resources are so focused on supporting online teachers that our students are going to struggle to make the transition. Steve, I see you've typed an answer there at least. Do you want to reflect on that a little bit?
What I've done is I've sent an email with instructions about the functionality that I'm expecting my students to use, with the caveat that everything may change tomorrow. That seems like the way the world's going right now. But the best plan of, these are the tools I think we're going to use. This is how you use them. This is what I think you'll need. Let me know if you don't have the capability to do that, given your setup where you'll be working. And so I've tried to train the students, or at least give them the resources to learn how to use the tools that I want them to know how to use. And I've also set up practice times. So if students want to practice ahead of time before, for instance, they're giving a presentation to the class, we have open rooms where they can do that independently, or they can set up a time with me to do that. But I think that there's going to be a lot of variability across the country with how much training or resources are given to students from the institution itself. And so to me, the safe bet is to plan on doing it yourself, so that they have the skills that you're expecting them to have in your class.
Yeah, I agree. Oop, Anne, yep.
So one thing that our university is doing that you might, if you haven't heard anything about this at your university, you might just ask, is the university is rapidly trying to source wireless hotspots and even computers for students who may have been dependent on using computer labs, or may get home and not have accessible home internet. One of our internet providers in this region is providing additional, like sort of a freebie internet subscription for people. So you find out what your university can actually offer, not just in terms of training, but literally in terms of hardware and access to get yourself online. I think one of my big concerns as an instructor, and I think this will be particularly true for people teaching intro courses or really large courses, is when you send emails and communication out and you say, what help do you need? What does it mean when students don't answer you? And what do we do in our primary mode of contacting students is through email or announcements that essentially go through their email and they don't answer you? Do we interpret that as a lack of access? And then what do we do? Do we interpret that as something checked out? I mean, our students are going on spring break 24 hours from now, so maybe they've just kind of checked out. But I think one of the things that's incumbent on us as instructors is to really try to pay attention to the signals we're getting from students. Are they missing assignments that they should be turning in? Are they not responding to emails? And then use whatever systems your university has in place. Like an early alert system or a bat signal up to your administration to say, I can't get a hold of this student, find out what's going on.
All right, Becca, then Steve.
So in an effort to, it's not a perfect solution at all to the exact conundrum that Anne was posing in terms of not knowing what the lack of response is. So I've created a Google form that I sent to all my students, and I've had a date, and then I have access horrifyingly to all of their phone numbers. And my plan is I will be calling them if I haven't heard from them. I recognize that that is, once again, I have 30 students in this class. That is very different than if you have 300. But I do think that it's important to remember the email thing, because I don't know, I think my students would prefer it if I texted everything to them, but that's just not possible. So, you know, I think we need to just remember that. And also, like in that survey, it's like, do you have a good place to work? In addition to the hardware and the like link, do you have a quiet room to do that in, right? Because if you're watching your little siblings or your own children or something, right? Like you don't have a quiet space, just like many of us are now dealing with. I mean, Dean Martin is fairly quiet, just nudgy. So any case, I just think it's important to try to follow up because we do have access to a lot of information about our students and we can do that.
Yeah,
I've never seen
that's what you get for sassing Dean in front of everybody.
Yeah. One thing I was just going to add about knowing whether your students are engaged. You know, if you do have a 300-person lecture, you are unlikely to know who's actually in the classroom. But if you're using a learning management system like Canvas, you can see who has logged in. And so even if they're not being responsive to you, you can see if they're accessing documents, reading posts, and engaging at some level. So there is a tool to kind of catch red flags where we might want to, you know, raise to our Dean of Students any concerns that we have about individuals. And it's a good point that we should be doing that. I'd also just say that in terms of the technology, picking up technology and getting students on board with the tools that you need to know, another advantage is really sticking to the platforms that your institution uses, because then there's continuity in the other courses. And so, you know, they'll be able to teach us some of the tools that we're not yet aware of.
So, and you know, one thing I'd add, Steve, and all, is that one of the things that's been really successful for me in the past is making sure that students have an opportunity to give me feedback on how things are going. And it can be uncomfortable for students to give you negative feedback to your face because there's an inherent power dynamic. One really easy thing that you can do is whatever your course management system is, whether it's Canvas or what have you, you can create a quiz that allows for entirely anonymous responses. So in each of my courses, I have a quiz. I start a quiz on the first day of class that's totally anonymous, and it basically says what things are going well for you and we should keep it up for the semester, and what are your suggestions for making things go better. So I don't say throw barbs and arrows at me. I say give me ideas that will make this better. But you can make that totally anonymous, and getting that in your students' hands after a few lectures and actually hearing from them, you know, hey, Adam, I know you're really excited about meeting synchronously on Zoom. It's not working for any of us. This, you know, you're boring to listen to in person, let alone when my email is right there. You know, it stings to hear that, but if that's the truth, then I need to know it as an instructor. So, you know, really, none of us, we don't often do that sort of assessment when we teach in a lecture style because maybe we're used to it or students are used to it. It's somehow the norm. But this is a really good time to open that door for your students. And I think if your mechanism for that is saying to them, oh, drop me an email if there's something you don't like, you're forgetting that you control their fate in terms of the course. And it might not be comfortable for those students to do anything but pay you compliments. So giving them a totally anonymous way to give you some feedback can be really empowering. And of course, with that, if you ask for feedback, it's incredibly important that you acknowledge that you heard it. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do what every student suggests, but it is best practice then to say, hey, I asked you guys for feedback. You know, 52% of the class responded. Here are a few themes that I saw of things that were consistently going well. And here's a few things that more than one person said are not going well. And so here's what I'm going to do to try and change that. Right? So asking for feedback is good, but if you don't act on it or at least acknowledge it, then that's actually worse than telling people you care about their opinion, right? You're asking for their input as part of a continuous process of evolution here, not just so you can hear it and ignore it. Or if you're choosing to ignore it, I personally feel that I owe it to my students to tell them why I'm going to persist with something even if they don't like it. You know, why do you assign us textbook reading before the class? No one likes reading textbooks. Well, that's true, but the alternative is I spend our class time defining terms, and that's even more painful. So, you know, getting that dialogue going is important, and doing it in a way that your students can feel comfortable to give you honest feedback. All right, folks. Well, we asked you to join us for at least 60 minutes. We thought we might drone on, and we've got some attrition of attendance, but we're still recording at least, so future generations can benefit from this. Let's make this a last call. If you've got a question that hasn't been answered, if you've got something on your mind that we haven't touched on, I'd ask you to type it in the Q&A or into the chat box now. And you can do so while Anne is talking to us about what's on her mind. Anne.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think before we all sign off that we should have sort of a closing note that this is not going to be perfect for any of us, you know, kind of reiterating Becca's points. This is not what we signed up for. This is not what our students signed up for. And you know, so we've talked about good things that we can and should be doing this semester, but if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. You know, if my kid prevents me from doing synchronous teaching even when I meant to, then that's just the way it happens, you know? And if the quizzes end up being 8 questions rather than 10, that's just the way it happens. And I think we need to forgive ourselves and be patient with ourselves as well as with our students as we go forward through the next couple of months, because there's a whole heck of a lot of ground shifting underneath ourselves. And even if you have the best ideas as we leave this forum and you're all gung-ho about it, who knows what next week is going to look like.
Yeah, and I don't know about you all, but as it turns out, like, I'm very inefficient with the faced with doom. Like, it's just not happening, and I don't, right? So I think just be kind to yourself and just recognize that, like, it's not just that you're at home and there's all the home distractions and your kids are at home and you're now an elementary school teacher and a college professor and a recreational leader or whomever, whatever hat you have to put on. I think we're also dealing with something that none of us have ever dealt with. And like, that's a lot. So like, be kind and, you know, and check in with folks and like use your newfound Zoom knowledge to like have happy hour with your friends or, you know, like conversations with your students and things like that, right? We like still need human connection.
So, and I saw one last note in here from Andrew Murray, who's looking for volunteers to Zoom in with his watershed hydrology course and be a guest speaker. Is there a way we can create a volunteer sign up for this? I started harvesting a little bit of this on Twitter. Stay tuned as we get our discussion forum posted. I'll start a thread on people who are willing to volunteer to zoom into another course, and perhaps what topic they would like to talk about, or what I had envisioned even was to say, hey, here's a paper that I'm really excited about. Whether it's there's a couple of my own I'd be willing to chat about, of course, and there's also those really great papers that changed your view of things when you read them as a student or when you read them early on. And even if it's not your work, you might really love to host a discussion centered around, Larkin and Sharp's 1992 paper in the GSA Bulletin, to pick something out of thin air. Yes, Andrew, the answer is yes. I think this is a phenomenal idea. We just got our discussion board open this morning and are yet to even have administrator privileges to it. So stick with me, and we will get this going. But in the meantime, if you are on social media, that's a good way to reach out and say, hey, I'm looking for a hill slope hydrologist, or I'm looking for a geomorphologist, anyone willing to do this. Steve, did you have?
Nope.
Okay. All right, team. So we are about 90 minutes in, seeing no other questions and no hands raised. Let's call it there. I'd like to just thank our panelists for joining us today, and I'd really like to thank Quasi for helping do the technical support on this, and thanks to NSF, both Hydrologic Sciences and Undergraduate Education, who supported both Quasi and HydroLearn, who Emad is here representing today. And I know at least one of our NSF program managers was popped on in attendance. So thanks for being a great community. Hopefully we will see you all again to just keep reflecting on what's been working and how things are going in the coming weeks. Much appreciated participation. Have a good afternoon. Enjoy the week and enjoy the opportunity to change things up in our courses. That's a glass half full view of the world.
Thank
All right.
you. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Adam, everybody.